Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Triple Strand Ranch. We're in the kitchen with a rabbit today. We got a few of these available. They go pretty quick, and we haven't gotten our colony up to the point that we have a ton of them, but you may get a chance to grab one. Now we're going to break it down first here. If you look underneath the front shoulder, there's nothing attaching that thing to the body. These things are pretty much designed to be consumed. But that's very similar to a deer, as a matter of fact. So we're going to roll it over, and we're going to take this other arm. Just look for that little shoulder blade there. And if you got a knife like mine that's more of a wedge than a blade, just put it under there and work it back and forth. And if you've got a real knife, it'll cut much easier. Now, front leg's off. You have some options, and you certainly could do this recipe with the whole rabbit, but we're going to do it in pieces. So here's the belly meat. And the belly meat is treated like a jerky in a lot of cases, if you've got enough. It is a little bit chewy, but it's flavorful, and it's fantastic. So we're going to take that off, and it really just cleans up the pieces if you remove it and treat it as a piece of its own. And once we have that belly meat off, now you can see we've got the rib cage and the spine and the rear legs left. Now, there are lots of options here. If you cut right behind the ribs there, then the rib cage, the rib section, is its own entity. And there's a lot of people that do it in a lot of different ways. This is just one way. I encourage you to investigate, to inspect, to attempt different things, try things, learn things. It's great. I mean, there's really no wrong way to do it, short of, wasting everything. So you can cut straight across the thighs and take that loin, that backbone loin section out, and that is eventually what I do here. But I did want to take the legs off of the spine there to make it a smaller piece to fit in my dish. But very similar to a chicken thigh. Look for that bone, look for that joint, and pop it out. Same thing on the other side. It really is that simple. You see the joint there? Just pops right out. Cut in between it or around it, however you see it, and get that leg off of there. Now, rabbit is very dense. It's very light, but it's also very dense. And I know that doesn't make the slightest bit of sense, but it's filling. It's dense with protein and very, very low on the fat side of things. So a little goes a long way. It's kind of like a quail. If you've had quail, it's similar to that. One quail can fill up a lot of space in your belly. Even though it's small, it's dense. Rabbit's very similar to that. It does not taste like chicken. It's actually a combination of chicken and pork. Now, if you have a more advanced palate, you can identify subtle differences in this meat compared to other meats. If you have a simpler palate, or you just don't care, you can say it tastes like chicken and treat it like chicken, and that'll be fine. This meat cooks and tastes similar to chicken or pork, or a lean pork, of course, like a pork loin. And the spine and the ribs are very similar to pork, whereas the legs are very similar to chicken. These are true statements, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And enjoy it however you see fit. And if you're worried too much about rabbit being gamey, well, please let me put your mind at ease. There is no reason that rabbit should ever be gamey. Now, that definition is subjective. So some people believe the barnyard taste is gamey, and some people believe that rotten taste is gamey. This should not be gamey. There's nothing gamey about it, rabbit here. Now, we're not talking about jackrabbits. That's a whole nother thing. All right, so we're going to prepare some vegetables, and this is so simple. Whatever vegetables you want in there, just about. It's practically a stew, just like a shallow stew. All right, so we're going to chop up these celeries here, and you notice I have some going some way and some going another way, whatever. If you want to dice it, you can dice it. I didn't feel like dealing with all that, so I just cut them into these chunks right here. Just try to keep them relatively uniform so they cook at the same rate. Now here's a leek, and we're going to take the root off. You can use an onion, a sweet onion, a red onion. You can use green onions. Doesn't matter. You just use whatever. So Jacques Papon told me to cut it like this to get the dirt out of the inside of the leek. To this date, I have never seen dirt inside of the leek, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. I trust Jacques Papon and his old school French cooking. Now, the French love rabbit, matter of fact, but let's focus here. I'm getting off track, aren't I? So we're going to cut it about the same size as the celery, and they're not going to cook at the same rate anyway, but why not? It's always a good policy to do that unless you have some other purpose going on. So we're going to take this here garlic clove and just cut the top off of it like that. Leave the root on to hold the cloves together, and then we're just going to put that whole thing in the pan. A little bit of avocado oil into a hot skillet. Now, avocado oil is pretty neutral, and it has a high heat factor there. I think it's 500 and something, 500 to 500 and something. I don't remember exactly, but flash point is very high. So you can fry with this, and it's not as bad for you as some oils, but mostly for me, it's quite neutral. There's no flavor to it that I can pick up when I eat the food afterwards. So we're going to go ahead and brown these off, and you want them brown because that brown is flavor, and it adds flavor to the rabbit. It also adds flavor to the stock and the vegetables, and we'll see that a little bit more in a bit. So it's a little deeper than I would usually go with this to brown something, but it works out real well. Now, the rabbit is dusted in flour. Now, you can put more flour on if you want a thicker stock, if you want more chunks on the bottom. You know what? The world is your oyster. Here, this is just a dust. I just sprinkled it over. And then I hit it with a great deal of TSR seasoning, which is a Creole type seasoning, even a blackening seasoning you could call it. So this rabbit was in the pan on a medium-high heat, medium-high to high, but closer to medium-high, for about a minute. And you can see how well it colored. And if you like it darker, then leave it longer. We're not trying to cook the rabbit here per se. We're just trying to get some color. Once they're browned, we're going to take them out and we're going to put them in an oven-safe dish. And make sure you've got a dish big enough for what you're doing. This one was just barely big enough, but I probably would have liked a larger one for such a sizable rabbit. So once we have all of our rabbit browned, we take the garlic clove and rub it around there, and all that garlic is going to infuse that oil, and it's going to get up all in there, and you don't have to worry about pulling out all those little cloves. We're going to throw our leeks and our celery into the pan and throw a little bit on top of the stove, because that's what I do. Don't do that, but I do it. Now we're going to stir it, get it moving around. Now we're not really trying to cook these vegetables into submission either. We are going to sweat these vegetables, and we're going to get them sort of translucent, but we're not tearing them down. We're going to add a little bit more of that TSR seasoning to the vegetables. Same flavor profile as the rabbit, but it's going to change slightly because we are going to have to add some salt and pepper. Always taste as you go if it's safe to do so. I don't recommend you eat raw rabbit to find out if the seasoning is right. However, once we get the stock going and it's boiled for a minute, we'll taste it and we'll determine whether or not we need more seasoning. This looks good already. These videos are hard to do because it makes my mouth water. So, stir it. Don't let anything get stuck to the pan. It shouldn't, but don't let it. Now we're going to move our rabbit around a little bit because we've got to get that garlic in the corner there. I like to put the garlic in the corner. I don't know why, but it's what I do. Here's a bag of multicolored organic carrots. Now, we are growing some multicolored carrots, but they're not ready yet. So I went and got what I could. They come out of the ground, they taste much better. And this is an example of how the different levels of the same recipe that you could perform. So the stuff that you get from the store, if you go to a better grocery chain that has a good selection of organic vegetables and they pride themselves in what they're doing, well, then you're going to get some decent vegetables. But these carrots, I mean, a carrot straight out of the ground is just a whole different animal. So we put our browned garlic clove in there, head of garlic rather. Did I keep calling it a clove? Got some shiitake mushrooms in with our vegetables. And now I'm adding some muscadine wine, or no, this is scuppernong. It's a white wine here. It's a southern grape, and no big deal. It's just a grape, but this one is sweet. If you don't want sweet, don't use sweet. I don't get caught up in all the different types of wine and stuff. I mean, there's different places for different types, but I put this wine in here, and I didn't taste sweet from it, so it smelled sweet, but it didn't taste sweet. A little bit of chicken stock. You can use water here if you don't have chicken stock. And this is another place where you could kick it up a notch if you make your own chicken stock, using our chickens, I would say, because they are the most flavorful after all. Then you're going to have a better recipe, a better dish. But you don't have to, I think is the point here. So we tasted our stock, we tasted our broth, and it needed a little bit of salt and pepper. So guess what? We put a little salt and pepper in it. No big deal, right? A little bit of salt and pepper. The TSR Creole seasoning is low on the salt because I wanted to be able to use it heavily in times of need. But you can always add salt. Taking salt out of a seasoning is something that can't happen, really. I don't think. Though you might could. I don't know. I don't want to say you can't because I'm not a scientist, but I would say nobody's going to do that, I'd imagine. So really, that's just a lot more information about salt than is necessary. Add salt to taste, and then taste it, and then if that's right, don't add any more salt. That's it. That's pretty much it, yeah. And this tasted good. It tasted great. It was perfect. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this and we're going to transfer it, and we're going to pour it directly over all that rabbit. And right now you're probably thinking to yourself, oh no, we covered all the pretty stuff. Don't worry about it. It'll come back. We're going to spread it out a little bit. And you want to make sure that fluid is at least halfway up the rabbit. And the vegetables help kind of lock everything in here and add more flavor to the meat. But you don't want to steam it and you don't want to boil it. It's that happy in between. If you don't have enough fluid, add more chicken stock at this point. No big deal. If you like it thicker, add some flour while you're doing your vegetables, or let it reduce even further. There's a lot of options here. Just play with it. Try different things. Don't be afraid. The worst thing that could happen is you overcook it and it gets dry. All right. Well, I guess there's worse things. Aromatics. That's a little bit of thyme. We have that too. So, here it is. Braised rabbit. Fantastic dish. Everybody loved it. It was great. I'm going to eat it again for lunch. This one rabbit was enough to serve 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 people at least. If you're not gorging yourself on rabbit, then you're not going to in this case. But that's not the point, is it? This is lovely stuff. I highly recommend you try rabbit if you haven't yet. We'll see you at the store.